They were already dying on the beaches of Normandy, and Germany was still staring at the wrong coastline. You did not mishear that. So how do you make Hitler guard the wrong stretch of France while the real invasion is already happening? Stay with me, because by the end of this, you will see the exact chain of lies, radio signals, a phantom army, and double agents that bought Normandy the one thing it needed most: time. Because that is what people miss about the Normandy landings. They picture the landing craft, the machine gun fire, the chaos of the surf, the courage on the sand, and all of that is real. But underneath it is a colder truth. The first days after the landing were the most fragile days of the entire operation. In those first hours and days, the Allied foothold was not a fortress. It was a bruise. It was supply lines stretched thin. It was troops exhausted and exposed. It was vehicles stuck, roads jammed, units scattered. It was the constant fear that if the Germans reacted fast enough, with the right force at the right place, the invasion could be crushed before it ever became a front. That is why this story is not about inflatable tanks as a funny footnote. This is about the most valuable currency in war: time. The Allies did not need the German army to disappear. They needed it to hesitate. They needed it to wait. They needed it to move the wrong way for long enough that Normandy could breathe, organize, and harden. And that is exactly what Operation Fortitude was built to do. Fortitude was not a single trick. It was part of something bigger, a vast deception plan designed to shape what Germany believed, not just what Germany saw. It was designed to plant an idea in the German mind so natural, so logical, that it would feel like the Germans discovered it themselves. That idea was simple. If the Allies invade Western Europe, the most obvious place is Pas de Calais. It is the shortest crossing from England. It is the closest jump across the water. It is the neat, clean line on the map that almost dares you to circle it. And if you are defending a coastline and you have limited reserves, you protect the place where the enemy can arrive fastest. That logic is what made the trap possible. Fortitude did not ask Germany to believe something ridiculous. It asked Germany to believe something that already felt true. And then it fed that belief, day after day, until it hardened into certainty. Here is how the deception worked in human terms. Germany was not watching one clue. Germany was watching patterns: recon flights, coast watchers, intercepted radio traffic, reports from spies, movement in ports, the rhythm of training, the kind of background noise an army produces when it is preparing to punch. So the Allies decided to manufacture an entire pattern, an entire reality pointing toward Calais. They built what looked like an army in southeastern England. They made it feel like that army was waiting for the order to strike. They made it feel big enough to be the main blow. And they gave it a name that sounded official, solid, real: the 1st United States Army Group. A phantom army, not a few props. An army you could believe in. And if that is all it had been, it might not have held, because props alone can be doubted. But Fortitude stacked layers so that every time Germany checked, it found something that seemed to confirm the same story. Signals that sounded like an army. Objects that looked like an army. Human reports that talked like an army. It was a lie with backup singers. And here is the part that almost feels unfair. The deception did not have to create a new belief inside the German system. It only had to protect an old one. There is a principle in deception that says it is easier to keep someone clinging to what they already believe than it is to drag them toward a brand new idea. Fortitude was built around that reality. Germany already expected Pas de Calais. Fortitude simply turned that expectation into a locked door. That is why the details mattered so much. Not the dramatic details, the boring ones. A real army is not just tanks and trucks. A real army is paperwork. It is schedules. It is units complaining about fuel. It is officers arguing about training space. It is convoys arriving at the wrong time. It is mess halls, maps, maintenance, promotions, disciplinary problems, and endless routine. The Phantom Force had to produce the kind of routine an intelligence analyst trusts. Picture a German analyst in a dim room, staring at reports that do not feel like a single trick, but a consistent, living pattern. He is not looking for a rubber tank. He is looking for whether the story holds up on Tuesday, and then again on Thursday, and then again a week later. He is looking for whether the same units show up in the same places in multiple channels of information. Day after day, the pattern keeps coming back. That is what turns suspicion into confidence. And to make that lie feel even more believable, the Allies attached a specific kind of weight to it. a reputation. Because in war, reputations matter the way shadows matter at night. They change what you think you are seeing. So Fortitude made sure Germany's imagination did not have to work too hard. It gave Germany a reason to think, the real punch is still coming. Now, let me pause and bring you into the room for a second, because this is where the story becomes personal instead of abstract. If you were sitting in the German High Command, watching the map, knowing the Allies had to cross from Britain, and you knew Pas de Calais was the shortest route, where would you anchor your fear? Would you bet your strongest reserves on the coastline that is logically the most likely target? Or would you gamble that the obvious answer is a trap? That dilemma is exactly what Fortitude exploited. Because when something is logical, it becomes sticky. The more logical it feels, the harder it is to let go, even when evidence starts to tug in another direction. And that is the heart of the whole operation. Fortitude was a campaign to control the enemy's expectations, to make Germany expect the wrong thing at the wrong place for just long enough. Not forever. Just long enough. Because Normandy did not need Germany to be fooled for years. Normandy needed Germany to be fooled at the worst possible moment for Germany to be wrong. Now, here is the part that makes this deception feel almost cruel in its precision. The Allies did not plan Fortitude as a pre-game show that ends the moment the first soldier steps onto the beach. They planned it as an ongoing pressure, a story that keeps running in the background, a narrative Germany cannot ignore. So even as the real invasion draws closer, Fortitude continues. The Phantom Army continues to exist. The signals continue. The preparations continue. The illusion keeps breathing. And when the Normandy landings finally arrives, the lie is supposed to do one thing above all else: keep Germany guessing whether Normandy is the main blow or just the opening distraction. That is the prize. Confusion at the top becomes hesitation in the field. Hesitation becomes delayed movement. Delayed movement becomes a wider foothold on the beaches. And a wider foothold becomes an invasion that cannot be pushed back into the sea. That is the chain. We are going to walk through how the Allies built that chain, piece by piece, and why it worked on a government that was desperate to see through it. Because once you understand Fortitude, you start seeing how wars can be won before the shooting even begins. And you also start seeing something unsettling. In the right circumstances, the most dangerous lie is the one that feels logical. You are the German commander for a moment. You have one big reserve you can move. Do you send it toward Normandy the moment the landings start? Or do you hold it back, because you believe the real invasion is still coming at Calais? If you chose wrong, you did not just lose a battle. You lost the only chance to stop the invasion while it was still soft. That is why Fortitude did not need to be perfect. It needed to be believable in the exact way German decision-makers already thought. And the Allies understood something about fear that is still true today. Fear does not chase every possibility. Fear locks onto the most logical threat and refuses to let go. So the Allies built a threat that looked logical from every angle, not one clue, a whole environment. First, they gave the Germans a headline they could not ignore: a phantom army aimed straight at Calais. But a phantom army is only convincing if it produces the same mess that real armies produce. Because real armies are noisy. Real armies are inefficient. They leave tracks. They generate routines. They create patterns you can spy on. So, Fortitude manufactured patterns. In southeastern England, what looked like a massive buildup began to take shape. Camps that appeared to be overflowing. Vehicles that seemed to multiply. Supply dumps that suggested something big was being fed. Landing craft activity that hinted at rehearsals. And yes, some of it really was fake. Inflatable tanks, wooden shapes, canvas tricks designed to look like steel from a distance. Kind of props that sound silly until you remember how war intelligence often works. You rarely get the perfect close-up. You get glimpses, you get shadows, you get partial photos. You get reports from people who only saw a slice of the truth. A fake tank does not need to fool a mechanic standing beside it. It needs to fool a camera at altitude. It needs to fool a tired analyst who is comparing 100 blurry images under deadline. It needs to create enough weight on paper that the enemy writes the story for you. And that is exactly what happened. But hardware alone could still be questioned, because props can be spotted. Props can be dismissed. A sharp observer can say, "This does not feel right." So Fortitude did not rely on props. It used props as one layer in a stack. The second layer was something far harder to challenge: radio. If you want to convince an enemy that a real army exists, You give that enemy the one thing every real army produces nonstop: communication. Radio chatter is not just messages. It is structure. It is routine. It is training. It is hierarchy. It is logistics. It is the sound of an organization breathing. So, Fortitude created the sound. Operators sent traffic that suggested units were forming, coordinating, requesting supplies, reporting readiness, rehearsing timing. The details mattered. Not flashy details, but boring details, because boring is what reality looks like. A real army does not talk like a movie script. It talks like a machine trying to function. That rhythm is what an interceptor trusts. And when interceptors began hearing what sounded like a massive force taking shape, the picture hardened. Now add the third layer, the most dangerous layer of all, a human voice. Because nothing makes a lie feel real like a person. Germany was collecting information in multiple ways: reconnaissance, intercepts, analysis, and human intelligence. If one channel feels uncertain, you cross-check it against another. That is how a serious intelligence system protects itself. So, Fortitude attacked the cross-check. It fed Germany what appeared to be confirmation from inside the house, where the operation stops feeling like stagecraft and starts feeling like engineering. Because human intelligence is not just about telling a lie. It is about telling the right lie at the right moment, in the right voice, with the right amount of imperfection. A good controlled agent does not send a single dramatic warning that screams, "Believe me." That kind of message gets rejected. It feels like bait. Instead, the reports arrive the way real reports arrive: incomplete, delayed, sometimes annoying, sometimes overly detailed, always framed as if the source is trying to be helpful but cannot see the whole picture. Messages confirm what Germany already suspects. Some messages add just one new detail. And occasionally, a message is wrong in a small way, because real sources are wrong in small ways. That small wrongness builds trust. It makes the next message feel more credible. Timing is everything. Setup. Too late, and it is useless. But if you can place a report right at the moment Germany is most anxious, you can make it feel like Germany is receiving a gift: clarity inside the fog. Fortitude used that emotional hunger. It offered Germany a story that made the chaos feel organized. The Allies had something rare: the ability to control what German intelligence heard from its own agents. The Allies turned captured spies into controlled channels, then used them to deliver information with careful timing, careful phrasing, and just enough imperfection to sound authentic. Because perfect lies sound like lies. Real humans are messy. Real reports include uncertainties. Real sources have limitations. So the information was designed to feel like it came from people who believed they were doing their job. This is where Fortitude becomes less like a trick and more like a psychological siege. It was not a single gotcha moment. It was a slow tightening around German expectations. Imagine being on the German side and seeing the same story from 3 angles. Photos suggest buildup in the southeast. Radio intercepts suggest an organization is forming there. Human reports suggest the same thing. At some point, doubt starts feeling like denial. And then Fortitude adds the finishing weight: a name with gravity. George Patton. Patton was loud. Patton was aggressive. Patton had a reputation that traveled faster than armies. The Germans did not need to like him to fear him. They only needed to believe that if the Allies were planning a decisive punch, Patton would be near it. So, in the Fortitude story, Patton becomes a signal flare. The Germans see Patton associated with the Phantom Force, and the conclusion writes itself. The big blow is not Normandy. The big blow is Calais. Normandy must be the distraction. And this is where the deception becomes almost elegant, because it does not require Germany to be stupid. It requires Germany to be human. Because if you believe Calais is the logical target, and you believe a huge force is assembling for Calais, and you believe Patton is tied to that force, then what do you do when Normandy lights up? You hesitate. You start asking the question that can kill you in war: is this the real one? Now let us drop into the moment itself, because this is where the lie has to survive reality. June 6th, 1944 arrives. The news hits like a hammer. Even that night, the battlefield of belief did not begin and end on the beaches. Out at sea, there were moments when Germany's screens and observers saw shapes and signals that added to the confusion. Small craft and carefully planned activity could create the impression of movement in more than one direction. The point was not to invent an entire fleet out of thin air. The point was to make the early picture messy enough that Germany had to keep asking, which one is real? For defending a coastline, uncertainty is poison. If you think you might be facing one landing, you can concentrate. If you think you might be facing two, you split. And when you split, you weaken both. Fortitude made that uncertainty feel permanent. Fighting along the beaches, airborne troops, chaos, blood, smoke, and in Berlin, in command posts, in staff rooms, the question is not only how bad is it, the question is this the main invasion or the opening move? If you commit your strongest reserves to Normandy and Calais is next, you have just handed the Allies the easiest crossing and the fastest route inland. If you hold back, and Normandy is the main invasion, you have just gifted the Allies time to dig in. That is the knife edge. Fortitude was built to keep Germany balanced on that knife edge for as long as possible. And here is the key detail that makes the whole thing feel brutal. The lie does not stop when Normandy starts. The lie gets louder. Because once the landings begin, Germany will naturally want to believe Normandy is the distraction, because that belief protects them from panic. It gives them an explanation that keeps their worldview intact. So Fortitude feeds that desire. It keeps the Phantom Army alive on paper. It keeps the signals alive. It keeps the story breathing. It keeps Calais feeling like the real threat. And while Germany waits for the second punch, Normandy gains what it needs most. More men, more guns, more fuel, more organization, more breathing room. Now, I want you to feel the human cost of a decision like this without turning it into numbers. A delay is not a neutral thing. A delay means units stay where they are instead of moving. A delay means orders get rewritten and rewritten again. A delay means commanders in the field fight with what they have, not what they should have. A delay means the enemy expands their foothold while you are still deciding what the enemy is doing. That is why Fortitude mattered. It turned uncertainty into a weapon. It made Germany fight, not only the invasion, but also its own doubt. And now, let me ask you the uncomfortable question that sits at the center of this episode, because it is the kind of question you cannot dodge if you are honest about how wars are actually won. If you could save thousands of your soldiers by lying to the enemy, do you do it? Or does it feel like crossing a line, even when the alternative is watching your own people die on the sand? Because Fortitude is proof that in war, deception is not a side act. It can be the difference between an operation surviving its first week or being shoved back into the sea. And the deeper truth is even colder. The most powerful deceptions are not the ones that invent something impossible. The most powerful deceptions are the ones that take the most logical fear in the enemy's mind and gently tighten it into a certainty. So the Phantom Army stands there in southeastern England like a loaded fist, at least on paper. Patton's name hangs over it like a thundercloud. Signals keep humming. Reports keep arriving. Calais keeps feeling like the place the real blow must land. And Germany, faced with Normandy burning in the west, is forced into the worst kind of fight. Not just a fight against soldiers and ships, a fight against the story it believes is about to happen next. And this is where the story stops being a clever trick and becomes a fight for minutes and hours. Because a deception like Fortitude is not tested when things are calm. It is tested the instant reality explodes. In the days leading up to June 6, 1944, Normandy was a plan held together by timing, weather, and nerve. The Allies had been gathering men and equipment for months, but the operation itself was still fragile in the way all giant plans are fragile. One storm, one delay, one leak in the wrong place, and the whole thing could crack. On the German side, the coastline was a long, tense line of uncertainty. They knew an invasion was coming. They did not know where. And the most dangerous moment is not the day you are surprised. It is the day you are half sure. Half sure is where you make the wrong, confident choice. So German commanders stare at their map and keep coming back to the same thought. Calais is the shortest crossing. Calais is the fastest reinforcement route. Calais is the place an enemy would pick if they wanted the cleanest, quickest punch. And while they are thinking that, Fortitude is still feeding them the same story from multiple angles. The phantom buildup does not go away. The signals keep humming. The narrative stays alive. Then, June 6, 1944 hits. The channel had been ugly. The weather had been uncertain. In the days just before the landings, Even German forecasters and commanders had reasons to believe an invasion was not immediately likely. That false sense of timing did not create fortitude, but it made the first shock hit harder. When the first reports come in from Normandy, Germany is not only surprised by location, it is surprised by tempo. The war suddenly accelerates before everyone is ready. The system is not ready. It reaches for the safest explanation it has. Normandy. The beaches light up, airborne drops, ships on the horizon, smoke rising, reports flooding in faster than anyone can process, confusion, panic. Then a new kind of fear. Fear of committing to the wrong interpretation. Because the first thing Germany has to decide is not only how many troops to send, it is what Normandy means. Is Normandy the main invasion? Or is Normandy the diversion meant to pull German forces away from Calais? That question is the whole battlefield inside a single sentence. And this is where Fortitude does its most important work. It makes the diversion story feel plausible. It makes the real invasion is still coming feel like the smart, disciplined read of the situation. Because the human brain hates randomness in war. It wants patterns. It wants logic. It wants a story that explains the chaos. Fortitude offers that story on a silver platter. Normandy is a feint. Calais is the real blow. Do not move your strongest reserves too early. Hold them where they matter most. Now picture what that looks like in real time. A German staff officer rushes in with fresh reports from Normandy. The tempo is frantic. Units are asking for orders. Commanders are begging for reinforcement. The battlefield is forming right now. And somewhere higher up, someone says the sentence that can change everything. Wait. Wait because Calais is still the obvious target. Wait because we have been expecting the main landing there. Wait, because if we move our best forces and the real invasion hits Calais, we lose the war in a single day. So they wait. Not forever, but long enough. Slow that down, because they wait sounds clean in a sentence and messy in real life. In a command room, waiting looks like men talking over each other while trying to sound calm. It looks like cigarettes burning too fast. It looks like a hand hovering over a phone, then pulling back. It looks like staff officers rewriting the same order 3 times because the first version commits too much and the second version commits too little. Somebody argues that Normandy is already too big to ignore. Somebody else answers that Calais is still the obvious main target, and committing the reserve too early would be the kind of mistake that ends careers and ends countries. One points to the reports. The build-up in southeast England, the signals, the reputation, the logic. Someone else points to the battlefield. Men are dying right now. Then, the same thought returns, like a weight you cannot lift. If Normandy is the diversion, and Calais is the real invasion, then sending everything to Normandy is exactly what the enemy wants. Wait becomes the most reasonable word in the room. And the cruel part is that nobody in that room feels like they are being fooled. They feel like they are being disciplined. They feel like they are refusing to be manipulated. What a great deception does. Intelligence. It makes hesitation feel like strength. Feel like the mature choice. And long enough is a word that sounds small until you understand what it means on an invasion timeline. Long enough means Allied engineers build exits off the beaches. Long enough means tanks and artillery come ashore in larger numbers. Long enough means supply dumps form and fuel starts flowing. Long enough means wounded are moved, units reorganize, and commanders regain control. Long enough means the beachhead stops being a bruise and starts becoming a grip. That is why Fortitude mattered. It did not need Germany to do nothing. It needed Germany to do the wrong thing at the wrong time. It needed Germany to hold back the forces that could have made Normandy bleed in the first week. And here is the part that surprises people. Fortitude was not designed to end when the first Allied soldier stepped onto the sand. It was designed to keep breathing after June 6, 1944, because the most dangerous moment for the Allies was not the first wave. It was the moment Germany decided what the first wave meant. So, the deception keeps going. The Phantom Army does not vanish. The paper trail does not stop. The signals do not go silent. The story continues. Patton is still waiting. The 1st United States Army Group is still the main blow. Calais is still the real target. And the goal now is brutally specific. Keep Germany expecting a second invasion. Because if Germany believes a second invasion is imminent, it will do what any defender does when it expects a second punch. It will keep forces in reserve. It will keep units positioned where they can respond to the expected blow. It will hesitate to fully commit everything against Normandy, because doing so would feel like opening the door for the real attack. So even after Normandy is real and bloody and undeniable, Fortitude tries to keep Germany partially trapped inside the Calais story. This is not a cartoon. This is not a magic spell. It is a pressure system. It does not need to control every mind. It needs to slow the decisive minds. It needs to create enough uncertainty at the top that the field does not get the clean, immediate response it wants. And that is why deception is so hard to fight. Because you cannot shoot a narrative, you can only disprove it, and disproving it takes time. And time is exactly what the enemy is trying to steal from you. Now let us be honest about what this looked like from the Allied side, because it was not a calm victory lap. The Allies were not sitting in London, smiling to themselves while Germany stood frozen. They were praying the deception held just a little longer. They were watching casualty numbers. They were watching weather. They were watching whether supplies were landing smoothly. They were watching whether German armored units would surge into Normandy fast enough to smash the bridgehead before it hardened. For the men on the ground, Fortitude was invisible. They did not feel deception. They felt bullets and exhaustion and fear and confusion and the raw struggle to expand the line without getting thrown back. So when we talk about Fortitude buying time, do not imagine it as clean time. It was time paid for in blood. It was time measured in hours where a unit held a road junction by sheer stubbornness. It was time measured in men digging into soil with their hands because tools were lost. It was time measured in commanders making decisions while half their radios were dead. Fortitude did not replace bravery. It multiplied its impact. It made each hour of sacrifice matter more. And if you want to verify the specific public records and declassified accounts behind this story, I link them in the description and pinned comment so you can follow the same trail and see where these claims come from. Now, the deception's most chilling feature is how it weaponizes logic, because you can almost hear the German argument in your head. Calais is the obvious target. Patton is tied to the buildup. Signals still suggest another force is waiting. Normandy could be a feint to pull us west. If we commit everything now, and the main invasion hits Calais, we have lost the chance to stop it. So we hold. We wait. We keep reserves back. We keep forces anchored. And each day that passes, Normandy becomes harder to erase. That is the trap. Not a single wrong decision, but a series of reasonable decisions that together create a delay. Delay is what an invasion feeds on. So, here's the question I want you to sit with as we head toward the end of this story. How do you beat a deception that feels logical? The answer is harsh. You beat it by being willing to abandon your most comfortable assumptions. You beat it by being willing to look wrong for a moment to avoid being dead later. You beat it by reacting to what is happening, not what you have been trained to expect. And that is where Fortitude becomes more than World War II history. It becomes a lesson about how humans handle uncertainty under pressure. Because when we are scared, we do not want the truth. We want the story that makes the world feel predictable. Germany wanted Calais to be the main target because Calais made sense. Calais made the map feel orderly. Calais made the enemy feel legible. And Fortitude took that desire and tightened it into a strategic handcuff. So while Normandy burns, Germany is not only fighting soldiers. Germany is fighting its own expectation of what the war is supposed to look like next. And Normandy, day by day, becomes less fragile. More men arrive, more supplies arrive, more guns arrive, more roads are secured, more positions are dug in, more breathing room is created. And once an invasion has breathing room, it stops being a raid. It becomes a front. That is the moment Germany cannot afford to let happen. But Fortitude was built to push them toward exactly that delay. Now we are close to the final question of this episode, the one that decides whether Fortitude is just a clever story or a strategic turning point. How long did Germany keep looking at Calais? How long did it keep waiting for the second punch? How long did it hold back the forces that could have made Normandy collapse? Because if the answer is not long, Fortitude is a footnote. But if the answer is long enough, then Fortitude is one of the most consequential lies ever told in war. And in the next stretch, we are going to land that answer carefully, without exaggeration, without fantasy, by looking at what Fortitude actually achieved in the only way that matters: the time it bought, the hesitation it forced, and the space it gave Normandy to become unbreakable. What happened next was not a movie moment where everyone suddenly realizes the truth at the same time. It was slower than that, and in war, slow can be lethal. Germany did react to Normandy. Units moved, fighting intensified, the front hardened into something ugly and permanent. But the deception did what it was designed to do. It kept the question alive inside German decision-making at the exact moment when decisiveness mattered most. Is Normandy the main invasion? Or is Normandy the first punch meant to pull us away from Calais? So instead of one clean, ruthless answer, Germany had to live in a split reality. And when a defender lives in a split reality, the defender does not commit with full weight. For a critical stretch, Germany kept a major shield in place at Pas de Calais, treating Normandy as the opening move and Calais as the main event. It was not a token force. 1944, right up to the end of July 1944, the German 15th Army largely remained in the Pas de Calais region, holding position and waiting for an assault that never came. The payoff. That is the time Fortitude was designed to buy. 2 full weeks was the minimum goal. Fortitude squeezed out something closer to 7. Those weeks were the difference between a beachhead that could be strangled and a front that could not. And those days mattered more than people realize. Normandy looks like if those waiting divisions are released immediately, without hesitation, without second guessing. Imagine fresh infantry arriving sooner to plug gaps before the Allies can connect their lodgements. Imagine armored formations hitting while the Allied supply rhythm is still chaotic, while ammunition is still limited, while roads are still jammed, while units are still sorting themselves out after the landings. This is why the word weeks is not abstract here. Mistakes and survive them. This means the Allies get to learn the terrain, build depth, and turn sand into a system. Weeks mean the German response loses the one advantage it might have had in the opening act: speed. Because the Allies did not need Germany to be paralyzed forever. They needed a delay long enough for Normandy to stop being fragile. They needed hours to unload, days to organize, a little breathing room to connect roads, move artillery, build supply rhythm, and turn scattered landings into a continuous, defended front. Once that happened, the math changed. A beachhead is vulnerable because it is temporary. A front is dangerous because it is durable. Fortitude helped Normandy cross that line. And that is the only honest way to talk about it. Operation Fortitude did not win the Normandy landings by itself. It did not replace air power. It did not replace naval gunfire. It did not replace the courage of men pushing through surf and smoke. But it bought time at the exact moment time was priceless. It encouraged hesitation. At the exact moment hesitation was fatal. It kept Germany's most logical fear pointed at the wrong place just long enough for the real invasion to become unbreakable. That is why this story is not really about fake tanks. It is about how belief can become a weapon. Because once you lock an enemy into a certain expectation, you can make them do something you could never force them to do with bullets alone. You can make them wait. And that is the part that reaches beyond World War II. The scariest traps in life are not the ones that feel absurd. They are the ones that feel completely logical. They feel like the smart move. They feel like the obvious interpretation. They feel safe. And sometimes that safe interpretation is exactly what holds you in place while reality moves on without you. Fortitude is a reminder that when pressure spikes, you have to be willing to question your most comfortable assumption. Because people rarely lose because they are weak. People lose because they react to the wrong threat. Germany feared Calais because Calais made sense. And Fortitude took that sense and turned it into a delay. So here is the question I want to leave you with, because it is the cleanest way to test whether you really understood the story. If you were in charge on the German side the moment Normandy began, would you have committed everything to crush it immediately? Or would you have held your best forces back, waiting for the second invasion at Calais? If you want more stories like this cinematic, grounded, and built around what actually mattered, subscribe to WWII Uncovered. And drop your answer in the comments. In war, what is more powerful, firepower, or the ability to shape what your enemy believes is coming next?